Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Muhi Khwaja. Welcome to the Muslim Philanthropy Podcast at American Muslim Community Foundation. Today we have on with us Attiqa Syeda, who is the co-founder and financial and development director at Sanad Trust Foundation, along with Rehan Mirza, the founding executive director. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us, Mahi.
Thank you so much for having us.
Of course. So typically, everybody that we bring on the show, we just kind of have a general conversation about their background, where they grew up, all that fun stuff. So, Attiqa, if you want to start with just kind of your experience growing up and share where you went to school, how you got to Son of the Trust, and all the details in between.
Wow. Okay. Well, the details may be very, very long, but let me begin with I was actually born in Pakistan in a small city in Punjab called Gujranwala. I spent the first 11 years of my life there. I'm a Punjabi girl by heart and by everything else. So at age 11 is when I moved to Montreal, Canada with my family. I have four siblings, four brothers actually, and I'm right in the middle. I have two older brothers and two younger brothers. And I will spend the next 11 years of my life in Canada until I get married at age 22 to Rehan. And I will move to Miami, Florida for the next 11 plus years of my life. So that's actually a tidbit of basically the last 3 decades of my life. First 11 years in Pakistan, then the next 11 years in Canada, Montreal, Canada, and then the next 13 years in Miami, Florida. So I married Rehan. So in my life in Montreal, let me begin there actually. There's a lot I can say about my life in Pakistan, but let me just skip to my life in Montreal. It was a drastic change moving to Montreal from no. It was because of the snow. We actually moved in January, so we land and piles and piles, feet and feet of snow is all I remember as an 11-year-old. It was quite a shock, to be honest with you, in every way. In some ways, traumatizing because I'd never seen snow in my life. But eventually, Montreal definitely grows on me and my family, and I'll call it home for the next 11 years of my life. So life was just incredible, honestly, growing up in Montreal. Loved the feel of Montreal, the small cafes. French was not easy, but I do end up learning it because of schooling. So I started my education in Pakistan up until fifth grade. Then fifth grade onwards is Montreal. Starting with a French school, then going to an English school, then going to English college and university. I graduated from Concordia University with my degree in finance, in financial management, actually portfolio management and finance. And that's a little bit about my academic and my personal life home. And then I meet Rehan Mirza in my university days through his cousin, actually, who was in school with me at Concordia. And lo and behold, we end up getting married a few months into our introductions with each other after our families meet. And I moved to Miami in 2007. I married Rehan in June, summer, and moved to Miami in September. And we begin our life there. And a lot has happened in the past 13 years of my marriage with Rehan. Allah's blessed us with two beautiful children, Jamal Ahmed Mirza, who's our elder son. He's mashallah 11 years old. And our beautiful daughter, Tabassum, who's mashallah 8. And that's kind of the birth of Jamal kind of is when our journey with the foundation, with the inception of Sanad Trust Foundation kind of begins. So there's a lot to be said about that, but I'll stop there with my basic introduction.
Thank you so much for sharing. So Rehan enters the chat. So welcome, and definitely share a little bit more about your background as well, and catch us up to speed.
So we have actually an intersection with Attiqa's story, not just at the point of marriage, but I was actually born in Montreal, Canada. So you know, uh, take that for what it's worth. But we ended
Plot
up meeting
twist.
in
Yeah.
Montreal several years later. Yeah, so I was born there in Montreal. I have one older brother, but we moved to Miami, Florida, shortly after my birth. I think I was either 1 or 2 years old when we moved here. And this is where I have been. I've been, you know, fortunate in many, many ways because where my father moved to in Montreal, in Miami, was kind of like adjacent to the city. So we were kind of between the city and kind of the more agricultural area, and had was fortunate to have good friends in my neighborhood and whatnot, and grew up in the era of rap music and break dancing. And my brother and I were just talking about it the other day. We were biking in the neighborhood, and one of our neighbors was playing an old rap song from the 80s, and we were biking with my son. And me and my brother both looked at each other and just smiled, and we were like, Jamal, this is the soundtrack of our childhood here, and we were telling him how we would get cardboard boxes and try to break dance and whatnot. So me and my brother kind of grew up in the 80s, and then obviously later on in the 90s. But um, we didn't grow up in a Muslim community per se, or even in a Desi community. We kind of were just here in the outskirts of the city, growing up in kind of middle class Miami. Had friends from just a really eclectic and diverse background. Our neighbor was Colombian, front door neighbor was Jamaican. We had other neighbors that were Bahamian. Um, and our childhood friends were from the neighborhood. We would see kind of our Muslim friends and our Desi friends on the weekend. But our parents made a great effort to kind of connect to the community at large, and keep us connected to our culture and our faith, through trips back to Pakistan, trips back to Montreal, being a part of Mina youth groups on the weekend and whatnot. So that was kind of my childhood. Went through the public school system here. And I'm actually just in the same neighborhood that I grew up in, because there was a new neighborhood that was kind of built out a few years ago that my brother and I moved into with our family. So I'm literally just 1 or 2 blocks away from my childhood home. Been in the same zip code, and went through public school here, middle school, high school. And then that's when I kind of got a chance to explore a little bit and get outside of the city. Went to graduate school in New York City at Columbia University. Kind of was in an accelerated high school program, so I was still a kid, and I was just in the middle of New York City, but got to live on my own, and do my master's degree there. And then just these successive events happened that really were impactful in my life. One was um, uh, traveling to Tarim, right after graduation, and then right after that, I had an internship with the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland. And right after that, I had started a doctoral program. And right after that, I kind of lost my father at around that time. Right after that, I got married to Attiqa. That's where we met. And then, shortly after marriage, we had, like she mentioned, the birth of our first child, Jamal. And now we have a daughter as well, Tabassum. And I'm sure we'll get into the inception of the foundation and whatnot, but Atika and I kind of made a commitment to each other and to our family, to start that project. And we've been, alhamdulillah, honored and humbled to be a part of that project for the past 10 plus years now. But alhamdulillah, that's kind of my life in 30 seconds or 3 minutes maybe. So.
Yeah, that that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. And I wanted to ask, what were the degrees that you received in the experience at UN? What were you focusing on?
My undergraduate is in psychology, and then my master's degree is in a field called social organizational psychology, which was a program at the Teachers College at Columbia University. It's kind of like a hybrid degree between psychology, anthropology, business, education. Really, it was really interesting education. And then while in New York City, I did an internship with the OIC, which is the Organization of Islamic Conference. But the internship in Geneva, Switzerland, was with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, kind of on their HR side of things. Their headquarters is there, so we were more on the kind of the business side of it and the HR side of the UNHCR's work. And that's what I was doing there. And then my doctoral
Thank
degree,
you
which I
for
started, which was in neuropsychology, but I just took an indefinite leave of absence. I did about 2 years of that. And at the time of my father's passing, there were some things that I needed to take care of for my family, my mother and my brother. And so I took a leave of absence, and I'm still on that leave of absence. But I did 2 years of a neuropsych doctoral degree. Don't
alhamdulillah.
tell anybody.
Yeah. Well, everybody knows now. So um, I think it's really interesting to kind of see all of the different backgrounds that each of you have had, and knowing a little bit more about Son of the Trust. Like, it's all clicking in my head. Like, oh my God, that's like so pivotal to the experience of Son of the Trust. So why don't we go into that? Either one of you can kind of share about the inception. You guys talked about how when you guys had your kid, it was really a pivotal moment, and you kind of wanted to create Son of the Trust Foundation to be there, I'm assuming, for families just like yours. So tell us about, how you got it started 10 years ago, what some of those challenges were, and kind of bring it to today with the different programs and services that you have.
Yeah, I'll start, and then Attiqa definitely has something to add to that story as well, because obviously without her, it wouldn't have been written. But I know for me, it was kind of a collective of, it was just kind of this perfect storm of thoughts and emotions and events that happened. Like I said, around the time of my marriage, there were a couple of things preceding it and that came after that were really impactful and provoked a lot of introspection and thought. The things that preceded it were just the really privileged education that I had, which I was really, really cognizant of. I didn't grow up in a family of great means or anything, but I certainly knew that for me to be able to be from this neighborhood in Miami, and the trust and the support and the encouragement that my parents gave me to allow me to study at Columbia University, what needed to be very meaningful for more than just material reasons. My father has always kind of infused and instilled in me this idea of giving back. Yeah, I've just watched him give back since I was a child, to his family, to his community, to his siblings. So I never thought, okay, I'm gonna go from this great university and start working on Wall Street or a Big Five consulting firm, although those are kind of the traditional avenues there. So that's kind of that. And then Tareem, what can be said about going to Tareem and sitting with the Habaib? The words cannot express, but if they were used to express anything, I think that they would say that it was just a really um, me learning about the human spiritual potential, and seeing people who reflected the shama'il and the qualities of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Because as a kid growing up in Miami, mashallah, we met people, alhamdulillah, and we met scholars and things like that. But it was just kind of being transported back in time to just a place that was really really impactful for me. And I think just also being there, it was similar to the experience at Columbia University. It was like, why am I here? There must be a purpose. And I remember sitting there with some of the other brothers that were there from the West, and just thinking like, why are we here? What's the purpose? And having those conversations. And so that really necessitates you being about something. When you leave there, you hopefully have a greater sense of purpose. And so that was like the spiritual Ivy Leagues, in my mind. Then I had the academic. And so those two things were kind of brewing there. Why did I have this extraordinary academic experience? Why did I have this extraordinary like spiritual experience? What did they mean? And then I was blessed to be married to Attiqa, and when we were planning and discussing our family and things like that, there was a question that I mentioned somewhere else in another kind of conversation that the son of one of my teachers asked me about what I do, and I was answering that by telling him, what I do professionally and the halakas that I maybe participate in. But he said, no, like, what do you do for Islam? What do you do for the dawah? And that question really, really impacted me because I didn't really have a great
Mm,
answer. Because here he was, a 12-year-old
yeah.
child, asking me such a profound question about what is my impact on the world, and what am I doing for everything that the faith has given me. And so when Attiqa and I had our first son, there was a lot of a rush of emotion, thought, and the blessing and awareness of that blessing. And what am I now to do with this amana that Allah has given us? And the conversations with Attiqa at that time were like, look, Allah has given us this and this and this. Like, we have to piece it all together and really maybe we can put something together really, really creative for the well-being of our son's potential. And so the idea was just, what can we create and what could we do for him that would preserve that spiritual potential, keep it intact, and allow it to flourish. um, and that's where the idea of Center Trust Foundation came, with this kind of really unique pedagogy and learning model, which was kind of a blended learning model before there was a blended learning model, a hybrid model before there was a hybrid learning model. But at its core is that, that it must be academically excellent. It must be all of those things, but it must preserve the fitra of Jamal and preserve his adab and his ihsan and his good nature, and allow him to be very, very sound spiritually, because then he can change the world. That was our logic. So that's what we've been trying to build, with the support of many, many people. And alhamdulillah, we've been building for 10 years now. So alhamdulillah, Attiqa was listening to all these ideas in my head. I just kind of married her and brought her down to Miami from Montreal, and she didn't have any family or friends here. But I'm extraordinarily grateful that that did not scare her and make her take the next flight back to Montreal. She actually listened with an open heart and mind, and she can tell you kind of the rest of the story from her perspective. That may be one of the reasons.
That
Yeah,
might be one of the reasons.
yeah, yeah. It might be.
Yeah,
No,
the
so
no
I
snow is a good thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think there's a lot that can understand from that story, and what better motivating factor than, the future of your family, and kind of, I think there's a lot to be said about even just being in the same community that you grew up in, right? Having lived in California now for 8 years, I kind of missed that sense of connection from the local community that I had growing up in Michigan. So, I think that you have that structure behind you, and you have these experiences, like you said, the education and the spiritual background, and now you've found a way to use that whole experience and move forward. So
yeah.
Attiqa, definitely chime in and show us what each of those programs were, and kind of how you guys built it together.
I can absolutely. I'm actually going to allow Rehan to definitely speak more on the details of the program. And the reason is because now he got me on board. That part is true. But the reality is that the dream was honestly his. And I'll tell you why it was very easy for me to honestly get on board with the vision and mission of Sana Trust Foundation. The way I arrived at that place is different. Growing up in Montreal was very different. I grew up in a very tight knit circle. Montreal community is very different. Feeling is very different. Had very different experiences growing up, and then just finding myself in Miami, Florida. I just felt alienated from everything that I knew, everything that I was affiliated with. I just felt like on an island. And Florida is a peninsula geographically too. You literally feel like you're on an island. The community was very different. So for me, honestly, it was a door that I had to enter. I had the option of, like Rehan said, either go back to Montreal and try to stay connected to my family, or there's this door and he's calling me to, like, hey, we can enter through this door and figure out what's inside. And for me, even though I couldn't see anything other than just a dream, that he was a vision that he had, that he was describing, and it was a very captivating vision that it was hard to say no to. And for me, I think the most motivating factor was Jamal. I know that in Montreal, a lot of my friends were trying homeschooling. Some of my friends had been married before me. They had children. They had tried homeschooling. It didn't work. Some of them had tried Montessori. And a lot of them, honestly, at the end, I saw after 4 or 5 years, either were moving to different cities, looking for a better option, or they had given up completely on homeschooling because it wasn't working for them. So for me, the motivation honestly was Jamal and what I had seen failures and sometimes successes as well, but I knew there wasn't a perfect model, whether it was private school, Islamic school, homeschool, all of them had some flaws. And what Rehan was describing, it was just an idea, but it just got me so excited because I was like, it meant to me that we didn't have to sacrifice, that we can create something new. And we wouldn't have to make all these sacrifices with all the existing models for education that were present in front of me, whether that was private school, Islamic school, homeschooling. He was presenting something that said you could have it all. And it was tempting enough to say, well, let's give it a shot. Jamal was just a newborn at that time, and professionally also I wasn't really looking to get plugged into any. I was we were newlyweds, and Jamal was young, and I said, let's give it a try. So it really, for me, I got on board because of the potential it held for my child, and my family as well. So it began with that motivation. So we will actually begin the work of the foundation, believe it or not, with a very small project called IBAC, Ibn Battuta Adventure Camps. That was the first program that we launched, in which we literally bussed like 40 kids from Miami, and we took them to different destinations. It was almost like camps. We took them to Everglades, we took them to the zoo, and it was just very, very it was
Nice.
Rehan's ideas again. He had all these beautiful things in that. So it started with the IBAC Adventure Camp in 2010. That was our first project. And a year after is when we launched, we opened doors for Sanat Preparatory, which today it's a K through 12 initiative. It's an alternative education, like a blended learning model, and a alternative model for families to educate their children. Again, like I said, it is the perfect fit. Like, it took the benefits of Islamic school, Montessori, homeschooling, public schooling, and we basically created a new model which took the best of all those models and called it Sanat Preparatory. Rehan can definitely go a little bit more into the details of the model, but that's kind of what happened. And then the development of Sanat Preparatory then organically began the expansion of a lot of our other services. So for Rehan and me, we're parents. And of course, we want to take care of the needs of Jamal, but at the same time, we as parents had needs as well. So we began creating programming that would help with our spiritual, social, and our health needs. So Sanat Body and Soul, or then the circle kind of grows. It begins with Jamal, then it grows to me and him, and then it grows further to including the grandparents. We knew, Rehan's mother lives with us, and we knew that a nucleus family, we knew she had social needs, she had spiritual needs, she had needs. So what can we do to make sure that our circle remains intact, and every person in that circle, their emotional, spiritual needs are met? Therefore, the Guardians initiative begins. So it was a very organic, the growth of Center Trust Foundation and its services. They're not just projects. It's a very organic growth of the foundation over the past 10 years that's happened. And I'm going to allow Rehan to speak a little bit about the details of those programs, but that's kind of how the services kind of begin to branch out from just a simple idea of a camp to now, mashallah, a big variety of programs that the foundation offers.
Yeah, and I think one of the great things is you kind of see this experiential learning, right? And it takes all the different aspects, just like you said, the social, the spiritual, the educational, and blends it into the unique experience for each individual that's attending. And they can come as themselves in their relationship to their family and become stronger for their family and build that community together. So thank you for sharing that. And Rehan, why don't you talk about what some of those programs meant, and in developing those programs, kind of what was unique about it, and what motivated you as well?
Yeah, I think, you know, one of the things that I would be remiss if I didn't mention was, you know, the ideas are one thing, and then but going from ideas to like actualizing them and having the courage to kind of walk towards them, that's another thing entirely. And I think that it really a lot of credit goes to the role models that I have in my life. My father, first and foremost, and my mother as well, were you know, just their story and their narrative of you know, leaving their kind of homeland and traveling, and then my father establishing a small family-run business. And so I saw that, you know, I saw that my mother and father, their first home office was in their room, where she had a desk in the corner and a photocopy machine, and they started a small business. It's ironic that we're kind of back in that setup right now as well, with the pandemic, you know, and I'm in my room in my home office, now that I talk out loud about their story, um, for different circumstances, you know, mashallah. But I saw that, you know, that they started a business in their room, and then to the garage, and then, you know, small warehouse. Um, and then but my father was always very involved and very ingrained in my childhood and in my memories and all of that, and his community and humanitarian work. And so I saw that, you know, not, that you don't need to sacrifice any of the important parts of your life. And I think people forget that, you know, for a career they might sacrifice their humanitarian calling, for other, for whatever other opportunity they might sacrifice their family, or their time with their family, or their spiritual development, or things like that. So I knew that there was a way to not necessarily have it all, but not lose it all, you know. And my father, and then, you know, sitting in the company of Habib Omar bin Hafid, Allah preserve him, um, you know, uh, this setting aside the spiritual magnitude and the knowledge base, haiba, just in terms of his how he's developed Dar al Mustafa and the community and his narrative and his story. I'm always of that, you know, it's my background, or organizational psychology, and I always look at things from that perspective, from anthropology and history and development and institution building. And I like to really
Hmm.
follow that and follow that thread and see how one thing impacts the other. So when I was there in Dar al Mustafa as a student of knowledge, inshallah, but also as a student of the process and what Habib was developing there. And then one of the things that's instilled in you is to always be who you are, and know that the dawah can come through you as you are, and just be sincere and be impactful with the skills that God has given you. And so, you know, having those kind of role models in my life and those kind of inspirations, and were kind of the what gave the courage, you know, that fuel to really move forward. So I want to give a lot of credit to those role models. But like Attiqa said, going from idea to actually moving forward, it began with like, we got to preserve this blessing of a son that we have, this child. And then, but to preserve him, we need to preserve ourselves, right? We need to take care of ourselves, our body and our health and our fitness. So the idea of sanad, body and soul. And then my mother, who was a widow, you know, at that time, and she remains in our family and lives with my wife and I. What are her needs, and what are her kind of emotional and social needs, and her community, and that whole generation, right? I started to see, after my father passed away, other people passing away in my friendship circle and things like that. So we knew that we all needed to play a role in preserving parts of one another. And so Senate Trust Foundation began to focus on that kind of constellation of important individuals in our life. So a child, the parent, the grandparent. And we knew that there was kind of this interplay between them to different degrees. Um, and so that's how the program started to evolve very organically. They were very honestly self-motivated, you know, and so that's good because we're fully vested in these things. This is not a volunteer effort. We knew that if we wanted to be genuine and true and help these ideas reach their potential, we needed to be all in. So Tika and I made a commitment. The first 3 years, we said, we're going to do this full time. And I we hate using the word sacrifice. We avoid it by all means, because what's the sacrifice, like really in perspective to other people's living conditions and things like that, looking around the world. So we don't use that word, but we did have to make some decisions regarding our careers, our income, our academic pursuits, our lifestyle, and the things that we could afford and not afford, and opportunities that we had to kind of put on hold. But we kind of signed that agreement between ourselves, and for the first 3 years kind of did that. And the litmus test was like, if this is resulting in what we were hoping to see in a child, then we would move forward. If it's not, we're not going to be stubborn. We're going to move on with our life as they were presented. But what was our observational test was like the adab, like, are these children really strengthening their relationship with Allah? How is their character and their identity being developed? And what we found is, not only were they academically off the charts, but they were very centered, and they were what we call at Senate soul centered. And so we were then, after that, like, we have to make this work. We have to make this work. And so years 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 followed. And so alhamdulillah, we've had our challenges along the way, but we're very, very honored to be a part of this work. We think it's very necessary. We think it's very unique. We don't think it's reinventing the wheel. There's a role for masajid. There's a role for our halal meat stores and restaurants. There's a role for traditional Islamic schooling. But there is a place for the Senate Prep learning model, and then the Senate Trust Foundation's kind of constellation of services as well. We feel they're very complementary, and at the same time very unique. And we're hoping to grow, and expand, inshallah.
So tell us about, you have this idea, you built the programs, you started offering these services. Then there's the longevity of the organization itself and what you want to see grow and build, and all of that takes resources. So Attiqa, as the financial and development director, like, what were some of those things that you wanted to ensure happened? And maybe it was reaching out to the local community, your personal networks, to support the initiative. How did you guys go about building that development plan?
So, big disclaimer, I actually took upon that title of development director just a year ago, and not really by choice. One of the incredible things with nonprofit, I'm sure you understand this, Muhi, as well, is you get to wear many hats, from cleaning toilets to carrying the title of a development or a financial director, right? You do it all, everything in between. So
Sure.
honestly, my role as a development director is really the past 1 year. But before that, it was really Rehan, honestly, wearing a lot more hats than other people did. He was. I was definitely passionate about the project, and supported it, and did everything in my bone to continue its efforts, which includes some of the things that you're alluding to, meaning reaching out to family, reaching out to community, family networks, and whatnot, and getting their buy-in and support for it. But really, in the early days, I think Rehan wore all the hats, because remember, I'm also a mother of a little toddler that's around me, and then so it was a lot. And then in between, mashallah, we have our second child as well. So in the early days, I honestly, it was on Rehan's shoulder, a lot of it. But I do know that I was a part of every meeting, and there was, baby bags being carried everywhere we went. One of the first meetings we had actually was, he's still a board member today. We call him our founding board member, Brother Sahil Kotari. Honestly, the project began in his living room. He was the first person that him and his wife opened the door for us, literally and figuratively opened the door for us. We entered their room, their house, and they were so welcoming, and they opened their hearts and their door to us. And we pitched the idea. We sit in their living room for about an hour and make the pitch. And they get on board without honestly asking many questions, which was scary. but exciting at the same time. And then the journey continues kind of, from that point forward, from the opening of that door of Sohail Qatari's house, and a lot of people get on board, including a lot of Rehan's childhood friends. Mashallah, they've been big supporters of this project, and I don't. A lot of credit goes to honestly him and getting a lot of his friends on board. Credit is always due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but the fact that a lot of the people that we were approaching and reaching out to believed in the project and chose to support it, I think really helped. And now it came with its fair share of challenges. I'm painting a very rosy picture. That's not to say that everybody was like, getting on board and saying, hallelujah, let's do this. Not necessarily. There's, nature of institution building comes with politics, because people come with politics. So there was definitely challenges, there. By challenges, I mean, figuring out and negotiating different views, and how do you stick to that vision and mission and move it forward without compromising, and letting go and filtering of that vision. So there were definitely hard decisions that had to be made over the past many years. And Rehan, as the founding executive director, does carry that burden of making that final decision. But looking back and whatever decisions we had to make, honestly, every 3 years of the foundation's journey, because mashallah, Allah blessed us every 3 years of the foundation. Like Rehan, had a vision for every 3 years. And my job, honestly, as a financial director, was to make the numbers work. Like, okay, you have this beautiful vision and mission. How are we going to make this work on paper? So I did kind of had to develop that financial model and make sure that we could pay staff, we had the resources to make it work. So, we kind of complemented each other. He would come up with a vision, and I would say, okay, well, this is a financial model that would need to make it work. These are the resources we need. And then we would both basically lift up our sleeves and say, okay, how are we going to get the money? So it was, that complementary process through the way that made it happen. And as a financial director, though, I will tell you one thing. Rehan says he likes to give credit to me, but the reality is that there has been moments in the work of the foundation where I have no idea how the numbers worked. And I'm saying this as a financial director, with carrying that burden on my shoulders and knowing what's in the bank account and things like that. There's just, I guess, a spiritual dimension to this work that I cannot wrap my head around sometimes, because somehow the numbers do work, and somehow, even though the budget, and I get nervous and how are we going to make this work, the bills were always paid. Our employees are always paid, alhamdulillah, by the fadl and grace of Allah. And we've never been, I'm very, very proud to say, never been in the red. We're debt free, mashallah. We've never used any financing or problematic sources of funding to fund the work of the foundation. That's something that I, as a financial director, take a lot of satisfaction and a lot of humility in, that Allah has permitted us to come this far with growing the work of the foundation without making any sacrifices as to the source of the funding and its sanctity. I'll allow Rehan to speak a little bit more about the development aspects of it if he likes.
Cool. Just really quickly before, one of the things that I've noticed as well, I've seen both of you participate in AMCF's Social Impact Accelerator. I know that you, Attiqa, have been taking nonprofit courses at Harvard. So it's awesome to see that, you're taking classes at Harvard, but then also accessing like our own resources at AMCF. I just find that awesome. And then the other thing is, like you've mentioned, like critical board members who have stepped in, opened doors, made connections, and seeing that as a critical component of your success as well. So, you guys just came off of a strategic planning retreat with your board, with your staff. You guys were introduced to AMCF actually by Wahid Invest's Saad Zarif, and you guys were the recipient of AMCF's endowment grant in 2020. You guys have doubled down and added more funds to that. And I think that talks to your guys' financial savviness So, it's been great to see the organization grow and having these plans in place. So, for those of you that are listening, I think this is a really great model organizationally. Like, obviously, the concept of the organization, the execution of it, and the process of it is fantastic in its own right. But then the back end execution as well, having these steps in place. So I just want to applaud you both for the hard work that it takes. And you guys have been in this a decade, right? So you guys are in it for the long haul. But I think when people try to start organizations, they don't necessarily think of the longevity of what it will take. And these are all those steps. So you guys have done it really well, alhamdulillah. So Rehan, yeah, please do share a little bit more, and then we'll try to wrap up in the next five minutes or so.
Yeah, I mean, I think that both you and Attiqa actually made really important comments right now. I think in terms of the development of the organization, again, I think because I was just coming off of, I think, my second trip to Tarim, and then I actually met with Habib Omar in California, and I kind of did my first pitch deck was to Habib Omar in a townhouse in Oakland, California, in the hood, and uh, kind of pitched the idea, and he mashallah has a great basira and insight, and asked questions, and then basically gave his kind of permission to start the work, without being heavy-handed, just kind of asking questions of me that would require me to ask questions of myself, um, and like without being heavy-handed, made clear what the objectives of this work needs to be, and what they are, and what they will remain, whether or not I choose to do them or not. Kind of said everything that he needed to say to me in terms of how this project must begin inwardly for it to outwardly have the effect that we're hoping to. So I think that beginnings matter, and that's my point. And in terms of development, and beginnings really do matter, and I think intentions matter, and those hearts in the formative stages of the work matter. Not to say that things cannot evolve and transform for the better or for the worse, but certainly if you have an opportunity for a pause, prior to kind of prior to that first shovel in the ground, then take that pause and center yourself and your organization, the people who are around you at that moment. So I think a lot of credit goes to that moment in time as well. And then as we developed, yeah, I think that we were fortunate, I think, to really be able to have some really good people, and we were fortunate to have some people who are not good as well, and I say that because I think a lot, there were all these lessons that we learned along the way, from the and the bad, and part of the learning from the bad was being able to identify the bad, which is a big blessing, where you see like problems before they hit you, it's like learning how to, what a stop sign means, um, and so we're alhamdulillah in a position now where we can kind of see some of those red flags, ahead of time. And so I think that's part of the development process, I think, as well. And I'm just mentioning things that you and Attiqa haven't mentioned, so I'm not redundant, because I think these are some of the more inward aspects of development that I think really matter. So really being able to identify, as best as you can, with Allah's permission, where good is and where harm is. Um, and then also not sacrificing, you both alluded to it, Attiqa, I think specifically about, we were never in a position where we had to humiliate ourselves, for funding, or to convince people for this project. Not that had we, probably would have had a better response in some circumstances, if we groveled, or we stroked people's egos, and things like that. But we never went there, because we always felt like our dignity, it matters. The dignity of the work matters, the dignity of our intention matters, the dignity of this khidma matters, and by all
Yeah.
means. And so I think that's a very important part of
Putting the
development as
mission
well,
first.
to be, yeah, to be cognizant of that. And then I think if you do all of those things, Allah takes care of you, man. It's uh, like unlike the book novel series, a series of fortunate events happened. And one of them you mentioned, like we met Saad, from Wahid Invest, and that was just by chance. I was on LinkedIn and I found out that the founder of Wahid is a Columbia graduate, Muslim guy. So I just reached out to him, and Saad was coming down to Florida for some function, and we met at a corner in one of the tables and we just struck it off. We were just like brothers that we didn't even know, and then through him we met you, and just you are, you mentioned Attiqa being studying at the Harvard and doing her work there in nonprofit management, and then AMCF with the degree of humility. But honestly, what AMCF is doing is like, man, all of the right things for our community. And I know, like I know what
Alhamdulillah.
you do and what AMCF does, and I get it, from the back end, not the front end, from the back end, all of the kind of coding that is going on, in the back end. I really, really get it and appreciate it. And it's such a long-term play, and it's very similar to what Sana Trust Foundation is doing. My dua, honestly, is always that I hope in my lifetime I see the vision realized in my lifetime, knowing that the possibility exists that I
Ameen.
may not see the complete vision in my lifetime, because it's such a long-term play. We're really trying to create, and this is kind of where we are at now, post retreat, in this next 10-year business plan, is a network of centers like Center Trust Foundation that can pop up, for any community that has a need, and avoid that Center Trust Foundation. We want to just create this kind of constellation of centers throughout the country, and then we can create momentum towards a tipping point to really be impactful as a community in North America, where we're strengthening ourselves in journalism and politics and in even Islamic knowledge and those institutions and whatnot. But we need to kind of have this collective momentum towards a tipping point. And we feel Center Trust Foundation can play a role in kind of creating that web of a network, inshallah. And so we're thinking big, we're thinking probably bigger than what people see in us. We're just a small nonprofit in Miami. But our vision is much, much broader. Allah has given us, the possibility to dream. So we'll dream as long as we can, inshallah. So that's kind of, I think, just my spin on development, to add to what you and Atika mentioned, and then kind of just a foreshadowing of what we're hoping to do in the near future and long-term future, inshallah.
Awesome. Just before closing out, I want to ask one last question in terms of your family, the sadaqah and zakat that you guys give. What are the top 3 organizations? Of course, we assume Son of Trust is on that list. But what are 3 other causes that you guys love to support? And even if you just mentioned the name, that's okay, and people can look them up later in what they do. But just we love always asking about that aspect of charitable giving and what you guys also love to support.
Yeah. Atika, you can go first.
No problem. I actually wrote it down, and of course, I had Center Trust Foundation on top.
Yeah.
So you said besides Center Trust Foundation.
Yeah.
So there are actually 3 charities that are close to my heart, and I do give to them on a regular basis, just because their credibility and a lot of the work that they do in different areas, actually, that they do. So one of the charities is called Hidayah. Um, they're not very, very big, but they're somebody that I've been connected to for quite some time, and they're one of my favorite charities. Islamic Relief it has to be up there, because it's a charity that we all know a lot about, and that just the diversity of of the type of projects that they do is just incredible. And then there's another organization that actually Rehan introduced me to, which is Penny Appeal. They actually do quite a bit of amazing work, nationally and internationally. So those would be my 3.
I don't know if I can answer this question
Great.
according to your standards, Muhi. I'm gonna just try to answer quickly so that you don't realize I don't mention just 3. So I would say, you mentioned, obviously we give to Sana Trust Foundation, and I think that that's really important, that if you're part of an organization, you have to believe in it to the degree that you're vested in it. That's another reason why we have our kids in the center, right? We don't have our kids at some like elite
Right.
private school or whatnot. Like, if it's not good enough for our children, then what are we doing? So we vested everything in it, and we are actually recurring donors to the foundation. And I think that's important. In terms of organizations outside of Sana Trust Foundation, Islamic Relief, I think just the longevity, right, the tenure that they have, is really relevant. I know when I was working with the UN, they have a very good reputation within the UN as well, so globally and nationally. Um, and then there are so many like similar organizations to Islamic Relief that are doing so much good work. So I don't want to be say that none of them matter, but certainly Islamic Relief is a really pioneering in that way, in terms of the reputation that they have. I think I know that at the UN they were very, very highly reputable. CARE is a really important organization because of its unique kind of services to the community, and we're blessed to have a really strong chapter here in Florida. Um, and then honestly, there are some uh, organizations that are done by brothers and teachers of mine. One is Darul Rahman, Detroit, Michigan, led by Sheikh Abdul Karim Yahya, who I consider an older brother and teacher. And then the Maqasid Seminary in Allentown, Pennsylvania, led by Sheikh Yahya Rodis. Those are like brothers of mine, teachers of mine, um, people that I spent time with in Tarim. And so there's kind of that fraternity and support there. And then obviously on a personal level, I just try to give to family, whenever there's a need as well. We have relatives, that may sometimes circumstances are a bit more difficult for them. So we try to look to do that when we can as well. But and then AMCF,
I was
of
just going to
course.
say, by the way,
I
AMCF.
mean, AMCF,
Absolutely.
yeah, AMCF has given a lot to us, man. I mean, we really just, you know, the love that we have for you and AMCF and your team.
Of
I know that it's
course.
not just one man show, but your entire team there have a lot of love,
Definitely.
and that's why we trust you. We trust you with our endowment and with the advice and the counsel and the friendship. We really we try to give you as much as you give us back in return, but I think probably we're taking more than we're giving. But we appreciate you, and
No,
we
no,
appreciate your
no.
patience with us.
Of course. No, it's been a great journey together. And just to even have your support at our annual symposium meant a lot. And you guys
Yeah.
sponsored that for us. And, I think there's a lot that, love all the organizations that you guys mentioned. And you can find a lot of them in our nonprofit directory on our website. So thank you so much for your generosity, your trust in AMCF, and the vision that you guys have. I think it's really critical for the community to learn more about Sanad Trust. You can find them online at sanadtrust.org. That's SANAD Trust, and on Instagram and Twitter, everywhere else, they're also at Sanad Trust. So Attiqa and Rehan, thank you so much for being on the podcast. There's so much more that we could have talked about, and we'll leave it to people finding out about your organization on your website. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Thank you, Moki. Next time we'll talk about Bay Area hip hop and East Coast hip hop.
Definitely. So much more we can get into. Take care.
I know. No, we appreciate you, man. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you.
Alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.